Hey folks, this is John Lee and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome. So today I'm going to go into a quick review of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now this movie should not have existed, but due to sheer power of the fandom, this movie was finally created after the theatrical release came out in 2017. Now, when I first saw this movie, the theatrical release back in 2017, this movie was at best mediocre. In fact, I had to do a rewatch last night just to remember what the whole movie was about, and yeah, there really wasn't anything worth remembering in that movie. That movie was just awful in a lot of different ways. But I saw that there were a lot of positive reviews in this for this movie, and so I decided to give it a go. And as it turns out, some of the really overglowing sort of review that you might have heard, they came from real fanboys, the ones who were really invested in the comic books and in the games and the cartoon shows and the overall lore. Now, I am a fan too. I like Batman just as much as the next person, but compared to these people, I'm just a casual fan. Most of my knowledge of the DC universe comes from the animated movies, not from the actual comic book lore, which it would go right over my head if you actually talked to me about that. So I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not sure if it is entirely fair to compare this movie to the theatrical release because yes, the actors were the same, but due to the different sort of editing and the focus and so many other aspects of these two movies that it can't really be said that they're the same movie. They're very different in so many ways. Was the Snyder Cut better? Yes, it was better, but just like any other movie, there was the good and the bad. Well, let's start with the good. Now, the first thing that I really liked about this movie is that it had a similar tone with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. Now, this might put me in a minority group, but I really liked the first Man of Steel movie. I thought that it was a great reboot of the Superman character. I was not a fan at all of the Bryan Singer Superman movie, and Richard Donner's Superman was, the time had come and gone. And that Superman was a very bright and optimistic Superman, but this one was more grounded in our current day reality and our current times, which is, not as black and white as it might have been portrayed in Hollywood back in the day. And I liked how they were a bit more grounded and a bit darker. Now, Batman v Superman in a lot of ways was a horrible movie, but it still had the same tone. And when Justice League came out in 2017, it had such a dramatic shift from the tone that Zack Snyder had done earlier that it felt like a completely different franchise altogether. The color palette was a lot brighter, there were a lot of different quips coming out everywhere. Even Batman was quipping in that movie, and the jokes that came out were just so forced, and it didn't feel natural compared to the rest of the movies.
Yeah. Something is definitely bleeding.
I personally never had any problem with the tone that Snyder set up for Man of Steel or Batman v Superman. What I had a problem with, at least when it came to Batman v Superman, was the horrible writing and story.
Why did you say that name? Why did you say that name? Why did you say that name?
But for this movie, the fact that it went back to the original tone that Snyder set out, I thought it actually, it felt like a jigsaw puzzle that finally fit again, and I really liked that. The second thing that I really liked about this movie was that all of the characters were much more fleshed out, especially Cyborg. Now, Cyborg was actually far more human in this movie than in the theatrical release. He was actually given a much meatier role, he had a lot more screen time, his relationship with his father was much more explored, and I thought that was great. He had a great character arc. And even Steppenwolf, the main bad guy, was actually given more character too. In the theatrical release, he was just a bad guy who wanted to conquer for, no reason, because other than the fact that he was a bad guy. But here, we have a backstory. He becomes a somewhat more sympathetic character. We know what his motivations are. And, if you have a bad guy, whether it is Steppenwolf or Thanos or anyone else, it works a lot better if we actually have a story. We need to have a plot so that we can at least know why we should hate the bad guy instead of just, he's the bad guy. Now, I understand that one of the criticisms that Man of Steel and Batman v Superman got was that in those movies, both Superman and Batman were responsible for a lot of people dying. In Man of Steel, during his battle with General Zod, Superman practically flattened the entire city of Metropolis. In Batman v Superman, if you saw the way he drove his car, he definitely killed people. so that was a constant criticism that both of those characters got in these movies. But this is a theme that Zack Snyder is able to do well. Whether we're talking about these two movies or 300, Zack Snyder is able to really focus on righteous anger. Whenever we see any of the Zack Snyder movies and we see the hero kill someone, it's because their anger is entirely justified. The villains have caused a lot of tragedy, mayhem, death, murder, and because of all this destructiveness that these villains cause, these villains are so heinous that leaving them alive to go to jail feels unjust. It feels like they have to pay with their lives. And the same thing happens in this movie, in this Snyder cut of the Justice League. And sorry, spoiler alert, but in the original theatrical release, Steppenwolf doesn't die. He gets dragged away by the parademons because, he feels fear, and the parademons feed on fear. It was such a cop-out, but here in this movie, he gets speared, and he gets skewered, and he gets his head cut off, and it feels earned. The character caused so much destruction that it doesn't feel right to let him just live. Now, like all movies, this movie also had its not so great points. And one of the things that I did not like about this movie was its runtime. It's a 4-hour long movie. Now, some of the internet fanboys of this movie said that it didn't feel like a 4-hour long movie, and my guess is that they didn't feel like it was 4 hours long because they really liked the comic books, they really liked the source, and they really liked the lore. Nerd! I'm not a hardcore fanboy, and for me, the movie did feel like 4 hours. At the end of the 2-hour mark, it still felt like the movie had not still begun yet, and it started to wear down on me a little bit. And so that took its toll on me. And in that way, I think that this movie could have been better had it been tightened just a little bit. There were some scenes that went on for too long, and of course Zack Snyder loves his slow motion. Such unnecessary pomposity, but okay, whatever, that's his style. But another thing that I didn't like about the length of it all was that the movie could have been turned into a short miniseries. It could have been cut into different sections. There's 6 parts in this movie altogether. It could have been made into a TV show, and I think that would have served the audience better than making a 4-hour long movie. Now, the next thing that I did not like about this movie was the way they introduced Martian Manhunter. Now, I know why they did it. It's because the original idea was to eventually turn this into a much bigger franchise. And so they decided to cram this movie with a few more characters so that we could say, oh, we're going to bookmark this character here so we can explore him later. I get it. But, this was a big fight. This was a fight between the heroes of Earth and against Steppenwolf, who was working for Darkseid, who is the main big bad. He's like Thanos. And if all of these characters are fighting, Steppenwolf and Darkseid and his minions, why didn't Martian Manhunter join in the fight? Martian Manhunter's help could have really been helped. It could have really been appreciated. But, he doesn't get into the fight at all. He just shows up once in the middle of the movie to pretend to be Superman's mom for some reason, which is not entirely explained. And then later on at the end of the movie to say, hi, I've been here this whole time to talk to Bruce Wayne. And then Bruce Wayne's like, oh, hey man. And he's totally cool with this too. He doesn't react in any other way. He could have said, why didn't you help us sooner? No, he just said, hey, how's it going? Bye. And that was it. And it felt forced, it felt crammed, and it felt unnecessary.
This hurts! Nothing to see here, please!
And this is one of the reasons why the criticisms of the DCEU was that it tried way too fast to catch up with the MCU. The MCU had been patient before they made the big tentpole Avengers movies. They invested each movie onto their characters before they made it a big movie. But here, Warner Brothers decided to go with Justice League from the very get-go and then talk about the characters. And I think that still, that criticism still applies. They should have tried to focus more on the individual characters first before making this movie that's as big as Justice League. But, I'm not the first person to make this argument, and I know that it won't be the last, so let's end it there. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about this movie is Not so much whether it is good or bad. In fact, it's nothing to do with the movie actually. It's more to do with K-pop. Back in the 2017 version of this movie, when Batman and Flash meet for the first time in Flash's hideout, they turn on the TV and Blackpink's music video comes on. And
Barry Allen, Bruce Wayne.
it was a bit of a big deal for them at the time, but in the Snyder Cut, in that same scene, the Blackpink music video is taken out.
Barry Allen, Bruce Wayne.
I don't know why that choice was made, but that was a choice that was made, and I thought that was an interesting choice. You know, I don't know why it was done. Maybe it was too distracting. Who knows? But yeah, Blackpink is not in this movie as they were back in 2017. Alright, so that brings us to the end of this video. If you like the video, click on like, click on subscribe, click on the notification bell, and if you have a comment, leave it down below. I'll read it later. I'm John Lee, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.